In this video, we're going to go over Birdsell's game in the H3 King's Indian defense. He's playing the white pieces from the ChessGoals 1d4 repertoire. But first, we have a quick Memphis announcement. Memphis turned 7 years old. He's famous for the dog cam videos, so we have a little treat for him. Memphis. 7 years old today. All right. Let's get to the game. So we have d4 by Birdsell, knight of 6, c4, g6. So this is King's Indian defense. And in our ChessGoals repertoire, we recommend e3 followed by h3. So this is kind of the first offbeat move that we recommend, but this scores very well in practice. Stockfish likes it. And it kind of can give you a nice positional game that you can understand well and try to outplay your opponent. So after castle, we see bishop e3, e5, d5. So this is kind of the main idea of the opening. We're going to lock up these center pawns, play for a potential g4 later, which can counter black's f5 break. And it can actually make f5 a mistake by black in a lot of lines. And because it's like the main plan for black in the King's Indian defense, this can really throw off your opponents, this whole idea of g4. The other way that black can play this position, if they don't go for f5, is to try to counter the center, and that's usually with c6, moves like knight a6, knight b4, maybe pawn to a5, trying to anchor this b4 square. Sometimes this knight will also go to a6 and then c5, or d7 and then c5. So there's a few different ways to play this for black. One is to go for that immediate f5 break with moving the f6 knight and playing for f5, but then the other plan is to play in the center like black is doing here. So here Birdsell plays bishop d3, knight b to d7, knight e2, and the plan with knight e2 is to play g4 and knight to g3. Knight c5. So at this point Birdsell plays b4. And I think another idea here would be bishop to c2, preserving that bishop and threatening b4. But black could still play a5 here, and I think it's a small advantage for white. But nothing wrong with b4. Knight takes d3, queen takes d3. The c pawns trade a6. So now let's take a look at the imbalances in the position. Black has the bishop pair, bishop on c8, bishop on g7. White only has one bishop, but the center is closed up. So with the center closed up, this should favor a knight over a bishop temporarily. Black's plan should be, can I open up this center? If black can open up the center, maybe these bishops can come to life. The one bishop for white is a good bishop. It's on the opposite color of his own pawns, whereas black has a g7 bishop that's trapped by their center pawns, and a c8 bishop that doesn't really have any active squares. So in this position, I kind of like white's position. And Birdsell plays knight a4, and I think this is a great idea. What he's trying to do is get a rook on the c file, put some pressure down here, eye the b6 square, and just put all the forces over on the queen side. If he can get all the forces on the queen side, and black's c8 bishop is kind of stuck, the rooks aren't connected, that's going to allow Birdsell to play for a queenside advantage. So here the opponent plays pawn to b5. I should note here there's a tactic, but it's not easy to spot. Knight takes e4 wins this pawn, because if queen takes e4, bishop f5, there's only one safe square for the queen, and then b5 forks the queen and knight. So after knight takes e4, white has to go into this line, and things get tricky. So black's probably up like half a pawn here according to the computer. That's just a little tactic that black missed in the position. But I think the idea, knight a4, is a really good one. So after b5, now we see knight to b6 and a trade on c8. So I think what Birdsell was doing here was thinking, let's simplify the position. Let's eliminate the bishop pair. Let's not allow those bishops to become active later. And now we can play on the c file to try to create an advantage. Quick castle, rook on c1. I think this is a very solid low risk way for white to play the position, and I like it a lot. Now let's see what happens in the next few moves. Castle by white. Black goes rook c4. Very natural looking move, attacking both of these pawns. Birdsell plays knight g3. I like this decision a lot. So defending the pawn on e4, allowing pawn on b4 to be captured. But after rook takes b4, rook f to c1, notice how this rook is having a little bit of trouble getting back into the game. That's a loose rook on b4 right now. If rook c4 is played immediately, after takes, queen takes, white actually has a big advantage here because this pawn is attacked, this pawn is weak, the bishop points to the queen side, black's pieces are all stuck over here on the king side, and this a1 rook is also coming into the game. So black has to be very careful here because with the simple move like rook c4 giving the pawn back, white has a huge advantage here. So rook b2 was played. This is a very natural looking move, and this is a classical game, 45 minute plus 45 minute. Rook b2 was played by a player over 1500, and Birdsell finds queen to c3, trapping the rook, and this is essentially game over. There's no way for black to even sacrifice the rook for any material of value. Can't sacrifice for a bishop or knight, for example. And the opponent plays rook to e2, giving up the rook in order to win a center pawn. I think that makes sense. But now Birdsell does an amazing job just securing the advantage, killing all the counterplay, playing very solid. So we got to give Birdsell a lot of credit in this game. He's a ChessGoals VIP member. If you want information on ChessGoals Patreon levels, it's in the description below. But he's a VIP member. He's been playing a lot of games. We have a play challenge, we call it, where you track how many games you play. Birdsell's been playing a ton of chess, and really it's nice to see a game like this where he gets to use his repertoire, use his experience playing, and just very cleanly beating a strong opponent in a 45 plus 45 game. So let's see how he finishes the game. Queen to b4, pawn to f5, knight to g3. So Birdsell's going for trades, knowing that he's up a rook. The opponent retreats, and now we see this nice strategic idea, f4. We don't want black to play f4, forking the bishop and knight. And after knight takes d5, Birdsell plays very active with queen to b3. So another thing worth mentioning here in this game is Birdsell does a good job playing active and playing for the initiative. So if we look at the position where black blundered the piece on move 18, white just played rook f to c1, and look at how active all of these white pieces are. Even the rook on a1 is about to come into the game, and how inactive all the black pieces are. This is what kind of led to the blunder. So a lot of times a blunder is not just like, oh, I made one silly mistake. A blunder is a position where you're feeling uncomfortable, and that leads you to make bad decisions. So here black was a little bit uncomfortable, knowing that white had this pressure on the queen side, and that led to the blunder. So Birdsell did a great job playing active. So now back to this position, queen to b3, pinning the knight to the king, and again this puts black on the defensive. Queen to a8, defending the knight. Birdsell attacks it again. These pawns trade, and now Birdsell doesn't have to give up this exchange, but it's still completely winning because white is still up a piece and the black king is wide open. So really these extra pawns for black don't matter too much because it's all going to be about how do we attack the black king. And there's an immediate rook d1 coming back on this knight being threatened. So again, black has to keep reacting to the threats. King g7, bishop takes d6. Again, creating another threat. And then Birdsell plays a nice move, bishop to e5 check, and there's really nowhere good for this king to go. It definitely doesn't want to walk back onto this diagonal. King to f8 doesn't help much because then the king's even more exposed, not being protected by these pawns. And the other move, king to h6, as we see in the game, kind of sets the king up for a mating net over here on the h-file. Queen to f3, nice looking move. Rook to d1, so look what Birdsell is doing here, just applying a ton of pressure on the center while this king is safe and this king is exposed for the attack. Queen b6 check, Birdsell tucks the king away. And after knight b4, look at this combo that Birdsell finds. Rook trade, queen f4 check, only move, queen g5, and bishop to g7 check. What a move. Deflecting the black king away from the queen. Queen takes g5, and black resigns. So this was a classical game that came out of the ChessGoals repertoire. So we have the King's Indian defense followed by h3. And the cool thing with this game is even though the players didn't play super deep into theory, one thing that we stress with our repertoire is we only go 10 or 12 moves deep, right? So Birdsell knew the theory, he knew the ideas for the first 10 or so moves, but then after that, he was able to just play with the positional understanding that he gains by playing a lot of games in this same line. And he showed a really nice understanding, I think, of this pawn structure with the pawns on d5 and e4, locked up with the pawns on d6 and e5. So really nice game by Birdsell. If you're interested in the course, we have a link in the description below. So this is our classical 1d4 course. And we actually have a Labor Day sale this weekend, but I'll give you the code now. So if you're interested in the course, we have a Labor Day sale, 25% off in the shop, and the code is LABOR25, LABOR 25, for 25% off the course. So I appreciate you guys watching. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. We just hit 500 like a week ago, and we're up to 520, and our goal is 1,000 by the end of the year. So more good content to come. I appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you in the next video.